the dark woods beside a guarded Cold War airbase, witnesses claimed a light moved among the trees with an impossible calm. By morning, the forest would hold tracks, confusion, and a question that still lingers. What was seen there? This happened in late December 1980 in eastern England, where Rendlesham Forest sits beside RAF Woodbridge and RAF Bentwaters. The place was ordinary on the surface, yet tied to one of the most debated military mystery cases in modern history. The base was used by American forces stationed in Britain, and the area was watched closely during the Cold War. That matters, because trained personnel were not wandering into the woods expecting a legend. They were responding to something they believed was real. On the night of December 26th, reports say security personnel noticed lights descending near the forest edge. At first, it sounded like a routine disturbance, but the shape of the event kept changing as more witnesses approached. What followed was not one clean sighting, but a sequence of observations spread across 2 nights. That makes the case harder to flatten into a single explanation, because the story grows from repeated contact, not a momentary glance. Some witnesses described a glowing object beyond the trees, low to the ground and unlike an aircraft on approach. Others recalled a pulsing or shifting light, as if the source was hovering or moving with deliberate control. The men entered the woods with flashlights and military discipline, but the terrain quickly became disorienting. In later accounts, the light seemed to reposition itself as though it knew where the witnesses were moving. One of the most persistent details is the sense of structure in the encounter. Witnesses did not describe a random flare in the sky. They described a controlled presence near the ground, close enough to leave an impression of intention. The next morning, investigators reported physical marks in the forest. Small impressions and disturbed ground gave the episode a material edge, turning a strange light into something that seemed to have touched the earth. That physical trace became one of the case's most compelling features. A sighting can fade into memory, but marks in the ground invite measurement, comparison, and the unsettling possibility that something heavier than light was there. Then came the second night, when the story deepened instead of settling. Witnesses claimed the object returned, and this time the encounter included a more precise, almost clinical sense of observation. One account places a beam of light sweeping through the trees, as if scanning the ground and the people standing there. If accurate, that detail transforms the event from a distant sighting into a direct exchange of attention. The most discussed testimony came from a senior security figure who later described approaching the object and seeing unusual markings. That claim has kept the case alive because it suggests the encounter was not only visual, but tactile and close. According to reports, the object appeared triangular or wedge-like from some angles, with lights arranged in a way that did not fit a simple star or plane at distance. Shape estimates can be unreliable, yet the consistency of the description remains striking. Another detail that refuses to go away is the silence. Witnesses did not emphasize engine roar or rotor noise, only the eerie impression of something present without the normal signatures of aircraft they knew well. The case also drew strength from the people involved. These were not tourists chasing a rumor, but military personnel trained to notice movement, distance, and procedure under pressure. Over time, statements, recollections, and official notes formed a patchwork that is difficult to ignore. Some details align neatly, while others shift slightly, as memory and retelling always do when an event sits at the edge of understanding. Supporters of the extraordinary interpretation point to the combination of witness rank, repeated observations, and physical traces. In their view, the case is strong precisely because it is not built on a single dramatic claim. They also highlight how the event unfolded inside a military environment, where false alarms were not rare, but neither were disciplined reporting habits. That tension gives the case its strange authority. Ordinary procedures meeting an extraordinary night. A later point of fascination is the radioactivity claim associated with the landing area. Even where the measurements remain contested, the idea of an anomalous trace helped push the story beyond a simple light in the sky. The strongest skeptical reading begins with timing and environment. Military flares, beacon lights, stars, and misperception in dark woodland can combine into a convincing experience, especially when people are already on alert. Some researchers have argued that a nearby lighthouse and other light sources may have contributed to the confusion. From a distance, familiar points of light can seem to move, split, or descend when seen through branches and stress. That explanation accounts for part of the visual mystery, but not every reported detail fits neatly inside it. The ground impressions, the close approach claims, and the multiple night sequence remain the hardest pieces to absorb. There is also the problem of how memory hardens around an event like this. Once an encounter becomes a shared story, each retelling can sharpen some features and blur others, without fully erasing the original shock. Yet the case endures because it never feels fully solved from either direction. The believer's reading sees an intelligent craft interacting with witnesses. The skeptical reading sees a chain of misread signals and memory under strain. What keeps drawing people back is the emotional texture of the reports. The witnesses did not describe wonder from a safe distance. They described a close, unsettling nearness that made the forest feel briefly inhabited by something else. In the years that followed, the Rendlesham incident became a touchstone for researchers, authors, and military mystery enthusiasts. It sits at the crossroads of official procedure, human perception, and the possibility of a genuine encounter. That is why the case still matters. It is not only about what was in the woods, but about how quickly certainty can fracture when trained observers meet something they cannot comfortably classify. Even the strongest conventional explanations leave a residue of doubt because they do not fully absorb the reported sequence from first light to physical trace. Something in the story remains stubbornly larger than a single mistaken glance. And if the extraordinary interpretation is right, then Rendlesham was not a random oddity at all. It would have been a brief, controlled contact event on the edge of a military base, witnessed by people trained to notice the unusual. If the ordinary interpretation is right, then the forest became a perfect stage for misperception, rumor, and memory under pressure. Either way, the event exposed how thin the line can be between explanation and astonishment. That thin line is why Rendlesham still feels unfinished. Decades later, the case remains a place where testimony, terrain, and uncertainty meet, and where the night seems to have kept one crucial detail to itself: